What if the one who saves your life doesn't wear a uniform, but has whiskers and golden eyes? This is not just a story about survival. It's not even just a story about a missing woman found deep in the woods. This is about something far more powerful, a miracle wrapped in fur, walking on silent paws. It's about a bond that defied logic, a moment that rewrote fate, and a cat that became a beacon when hope was nearly gone. You're about to hear one of those animal rescue stories that sticks with you long after the video ends. A tale of heroic pets, stray animals, and the extraordinary ways they change our lives, sometimes when we least expect it. Because not all heroes bark, some purr. And sometimes the most lost among us are the ones who help others find their way. So sit back, take a deep breath, and open your heart. This story may start in the silence of the forest, but trust me, by the end, it'll be roaring inside your chest. For most of her life, Eleanor had always been the one to rescue others. As a volunteer nurse and part-time hiking instructor, she spent her days tending to people's wounds, physical and emotional alike. Her weekends were filled with mountain trails and fresh pine air, her solace when the weight of life became too much. But lately, things had changed. After a tragic car accident took her younger brother, she started to pull away from the world that once gave her peace. Eleanor found herself walking longer and deeper into the woods each day, as if she was searching for something she couldn't name. The forest near her cabin in upstate Vermont was dense, quiet, and comforting in a way that people no longer were. She carried an old hiking backpack and a journal that hadn't been touched in months. Her neighbors noticed she smiled less, and her once lively eyes seemed lost in thought, like she was drifting further into her own mind. She wasn't eating well. Her once toned body had grown frail, and she often forgot to bring food on her long hikes. Her parents called her daily, and though she always answered, her words were short and flat. Everyone thought she needed help, but Eleanor believed what she needed was space. Space to breathe, space to heal, or maybe space to disappear. No one really knew. One crisp October morning, Eleanor left her cabin just after sunrise, not telling anyone where she was headed. She planned on a short walk, but her feet carried her far past familiar trails. Hours passed. Her phone had no signal, and shadows began to stretch across the forest floor. When she finally realized how far she'd gone, panic slowly started to creep in, but the damage was already done. By nightfall, the cold settled in, and Eleanor was alone, with no flashlight, no food, and no sense of direction. She huddled beneath a tree, trying to stay calm, hoping someone might realize she was missing. But out here, in the thick of the wilderness, no one could hear her. That's when something unexpected began to stir, not in the forest, but in the fate that had quietly been watching her all along. The next morning, Eleanor awoke to a thin layer of frost clinging to her jacket and hair. Her limbs were stiff, her throat dry, and her hope wearing thin. She tried retracing her steps, but every direction looked the same. Trees, moss, silence. Her voice cracked as she called out, more to herself than anyone else. The stillness of the woods answered with nothing but the rustling of cold morning wind. She was completely and utterly alone, or so she thought. About an hour later, as she stumbled through a narrow path lined with ferns and roots, Eleanor froze. There, perched on a low-hanging branch, was a cat. Not a bobcat or some wild creature, but a small, scruffy domestic cat with golden eyes and patchy fur. It stared at her with an odd intensity, neither afraid nor aggressive. In that moment, Eleanor felt something stir inside her. A flicker of curiosity, maybe even comfort. The cat meowed softly, then jumped down and began walking ahead, pausing every few steps to glance back at her. Eleanor blinked, unsure if she was hallucinating. "You lost too, little guy," she whispered, her voice rough from the cold. But the cat didn't seem lost at all. It moved with a strange purpose, like it knew exactly where it was going and wanted her to follow. At first, Eleanor hesitated. Was this some feral stray? Was it just wandering like she was? But then she noticed something strange. Every time she stopped moving, the cat would turn around, walk back toward her, and meow loudly, almost urging her forward. It wasn't just coincidence. It was intention. And after a few minutes of this strange dance, Eleanor gave in. "All right," she murmured, managing a faint smile. "Lead the way." As she followed the cat, a quiet hope began to bloom where fear once was. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know why this animal had appeared at her lowest point. But for the first time since she'd gotten lost, Eleanor felt like she wasn't alone. Like maybe, just maybe, something greater was at play. Something that had sent a small, unexpected guide to walk her out of the darkness. With each careful step, Eleanor followed the cat deeper into the woods, yet oddly, she didn't feel like she was getting more lost. The cat moved with certainty, pausing when she needed to rest, meowing when she slowed down too much, and occasionally brushing against her legs like a gentle nudge to keep going. She began to talk to it, quietly at first, as if to fill the silence. "You're a strange little thing," she whispered, "but I think I needed strange today." As the hours passed, something shifted between them. Eleanor gave the cat a name, Milo, after a childhood pet who'd once slept on her chest during thunderstorms. Milo seemed to respond to it, perking his ears every time she said it. They shared a moment under a fallen log when Eleanor scraped her knee and sat down in pain. Milo approached, pressed his warm little body against her side, and purred. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was connection. Small moments began to feel monumental. Eleanor noticed how Milo always avoided dangerous ground, steering her away from steep ledges and thick brambles. He led her toward clearer trails and even toward patches of wild berries that she hesitantly ate, grateful for anything with moisture. It was as if Milo had done this before, as if this wasn't his first time guiding someone out of the woods. That night, they found shelter in a shallow cave-like crevice in the rocks. Eleanor used her jacket as a blanket and Milo curled tightly against her chest, sharing his warmth. For the first time since she'd gotten lost, she didn't cry herself to sleep. She dreamed of home, of her brother, of something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. When she woke, the cat was still there, eyes watchful and calm, as if standing guard through the night. In the quiet moments between walking and resting, Eleanor began to talk out loud, not just to Milo, but to herself. She talked about her brother, the guilt she carried, the loneliness. It was easier to say these things to a cat. There was no judgment in those golden eyes. Just patience, understanding. Milo was no longer just a stray. He was something else entirely, something sent to save her, not just from the forest, but from herself. On the third day, the weather turned. Thick clouds rolled in fast, swallowing the sun and blanketing the forest in a heavy gray mist. The temperature dropped, and the wind began to howl through the trees like a warning. Eleanor wrapped her arms tightly around herself, shivering as she tried to keep up with Milo's quickened pace. The cat seemed agitated now, darting ahead and meowing more often, as if sensing that time was running out. That's when it happened. While crossing a shallow ravine, Eleanor slipped. Her foot caught on a slick rock, and she tumbled sideways, crashing into the mud with a sharp cry. Pain shot up her ankle, twisted, maybe worse. She tried to stand, but her leg buckled under her. The forest spun around her, and for the first time, real panic set in. Milo circled her, meowing frantically, tail flicking in frustration. She felt helpless, broken, and completely alone again. Tears blurred her vision as she leaned back against a mossy boulder, clutching her leg. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't." Milo pawed at her gently, then suddenly bolted into the woods. She called after him, terrified that the only soul who'd stayed with her was now leaving. The emptiness returned like a wave, cold and merciless. Had she imagined their bond? Had she placed her hope in a stray that didn't care after all? Minutes felt like hours. She cried, screamed, even threw a stick in frustration. But then, just as the first drops of rain began to fall, Milo returned. And he wasn't alone. Trotting behind him, panting and wide-eyed, was a golden retriever wearing a service vest. Eleanor blinked in disbelief as the dog ran straight to her, tail wagging. A tag on the vest read, "Sarkay 9 Unit, buddy." She looked up and saw Milo standing proudly above as if to say, "Told you I'd find help." Within 30 minutes, voices echoed through the trees. Search and rescue teams emerged from mist, led by Buddy. One of them knelt beside her, stunned. "How did you—" "We've been searching for 3 days." Eleanor couldn't stop smiling through the tears. She looked over at Milo, who now sat quietly at the edge of the clearing, tail wrapped around his paws. He'd brought her help. He'd saved her life. But something told her his journey wasn't over yet. Back at the ranger station, Eleanor sat wrapped in a warm blanket, sipping hot tea with trembling hands. Her ankle was sprained, but not broken. The medical team said she was lucky, another day alone, and things could have turned out very differently. But Eleanor didn't feel lucky. She felt changed. Like the person who walked into those woods had been quietly replaced by someone stronger, someone who now believed in second chances and silent miracles with golden eyes. While the Rangers reviewed maps and timelines, Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about Milo. The moment they arrived, he had disappeared into the woods again, vanishing as mysteriously as he'd appeared. She tried calling for him, begging him to come back. But there was only silence. A bittersweet ache settled in her chest. He wasn't a pet. He wasn't meant to stay. He was a rescuer in his own right, a little guardian disguised in dirty fur. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor's story spread. Local news picked it up. Lost woman found thanks to mysterious cat. Headlines called Milo a hero. People shared theories online. Was he a stray with a sharp sense of direction or something more? A local rescue group even searched the area to try and find him, hoping to give the hero cat a forever home. But Milo, as if sensing his work was done, stayed hidden, perhaps already helping someone else. For Eleanor, life didn't just go back to normal. It couldn't. That experience forced her to slow down, reflect, and most importantly, reconnect with herself, with nature, and with those she'd pushed away. She called her brother. She told him everything. Through tears and laughter, they began rebuilding what had been broken. And whenever she shared the story, she made sure to speak of Milo, not as a random animal, but as a guide. A turning point, a miracle on four paws. She now volunteers at a local animal rescue, helping stray animals find homes, just like Milo once found her. She keeps a small photo of a golden-eyed tabby on her desk, drawn by a young girl who heard her story. Underneath it, written in childlike handwriting, are the words, "Heroic pets save hearts too." Eleanor smiles every time she sees it, because Milo didn't just lead her out of the woods. He led her back to who she really was. Before he was known as a hero, Milo was just another shadow in the forest, one of countless stray animals who'd been abandoned, forgotten, or born in the wild. Locals said he'd been seen near the trailheads for years, always alone, always silent. Some hikers left food for him. A few even tried to coax him into their arms, but he never let anyone close. He watched from the trees like a ghost, vanishing before a hand could reach him. People called him a wanderer, but maybe he was watching for something else. Milo wasn't the kind of cat you adopt. He was the kind that adopted you when you needed him most. There were stories, whispered in the town below the forest, of a cat that had guided lost hikers back to trails or appeared at campsites just as a storm was rolling in. No one had proof. No pictures. Just tales that sounded more like folklore than fact. But after Eleanor's rescue, those stories didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. Maybe Milo wasn't lost. Maybe he had a purpose. It's easy to overlook animals like Milo. Strays blend into the background of everyday life. People rush past them, assume they're broken or dangerous. But what if some of them are watching, waiting, choosing the right moment to step in? Milo didn't wear a vest. He didn't come with training papers or a title. Yet when it mattered, he acted faster, braver, and more selflessly than most humans might have. That's the kind of courage that turns a stray into a legend. Some say Milo was never meant to be found after the rescue, that his job was done. But Eleanor believes he's still out there, weaving through trees and following trails, searching for the next lost soul. She hopes he's warm, safe, and fed. But more than that, she hopes he knows he mattered. That for once, a forgotten animal became the reason someone survived, not just physically, but emotionally. He proved that love doesn't need a leash. Sometimes it walks beside you in silence until you're ready to listen. And maybe, just maybe, Milo didn't disappear after all. Maybe he simply moved on to another story, another lost hiker, another broken heart. Because that's what heroic pets do. They don't wait for praise. They move quietly through the world, changing lives in ways most people will never see. But if you're lucky, really lucky, you'll meet one. And if you do, hold that moment close. Because sometimes the smallest paws leave the biggest prints on our lives. News of Eleanor's miraculous rescue spread like wildfire, first in the nearby town, then across the state, and eventually on national platforms. But what really captured people's hearts wasn't just the survival story, it was Milo. A cat nameless and wild, who somehow became the unlikely hero of an unfolding drama deep in the woods. Headlines read, "Heroic cat leads rescuers to lost woman," and "Stray animal saves life in Oregon wilderness." Suddenly, the idea of just a stray didn't sit so easily with people anymore. Local shelters reported a surge in visits almost overnight. Families inspired by Milo's story came searching for animals to adopt, hoping to find their own little miracle. The phrase heroic pets became more than a hashtag, it became a movement. A wave of compassion swept through the community, urging people to see stray animals not as burdens, but as beings full of potential and silent wisdom. Volunteers flooded rescue centers. Donations spiked. And somewhere in the woods, Milo had changed more lives than he could ever know. Eleanor herself became a soft-spoken advocate. She never saw herself as someone who could make an impact, but Milo's act pushed her into the light. She began sharing her story at schools, community events, and shelters. Her message was simple: never underestimate the power of forgotten animals. Her voice trembled every time she spoke of the moment Milo vanished into the trees, but her eyes lit up when she talked about the life he gave her. It was no longer just her rescue. It was a rescue story shared by a whole town. The ranger station where she was found eventually set up a small memorial near the trailhead, a wooden carving of a cat perched on a rock, with a plaque that read, "To the silent guardian who showed us the way." Hikers now paused to leave treats, notes, and even drawings for Milo. Children would point and ask, "Is this where the hero cat lived?" And parents would smile and nod, touched by the legacy left by a creature who had no home, yet changed so many. Milo became more than a symbol. He became a reminder that every life, no matter how small or overlooked, has the power to create change. His story cracked open the hard shell of indifference and reminded people to look closer, care deeper, and act sooner. In a world full of noise, he moved in silence. And yet, his paw prints echoed louder than most ever could. Months passed. The seasons shifted from the sharp chill of winter to the gentle bloom of spring. Eleanor had returned to her routine, teaching art classes at the local community center, volunteering at shelters on weekends, and spending quiet mornings walking forest trails. But no matter how full her days became, there was always a part of her heart that wandered. It lingered in the woods, calling out silently for the cat who once saved her. She had long accepted that Milo was gone, but her soul still hoped for a sign. One misty morning, she took a walk along the trail where it all began. The fog hung low, and dew sparkled on every leaf. The air was still, save for the soft crunch of leaves beneath her boots. She stopped at the carved memorial, gently placing a treat beside it, as she always did. "Wherever you are," she whispered, "I hope you're okay." Just then, a faint rustle echoed behind her, soft, hesitant, and familiar. Her breath caught. Slowly, she turned. There he was. Perched on a fallen log just a few feet away, eyes locked onto hers, was a golden-eyed tabby. Thinner, scruffier, but unmistakably him. Milo. Time froze. Her hands trembled as she knelt down, tears already welling up. "Milo," she breathed, barely daring to speak louder. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He simply watched, head slightly tilted, like he remembered. Like he'd been watching all along. After a moment, he stepped forward, slow, cautious, graceful, and rubbed gently against her hand. It wasn't the dramatic leap into arms you'd expect in a movie. It was quiet, sacred, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Eleanor stayed still, afraid to break the spell. Her heart raced with disbelief and gratitude. For a few minutes, she and Milo sat together in silence. No need for words, just presence, just understanding. He was safe, he was real, and somehow he'd found his way back to her once more. She didn't try to cage him, didn't beg him to come home. Instead, she opened her bag and pulled out a soft piece of chicken she always carried just in case. He ate slowly, eyes never leaving hers. Then, without warning, he turned and padded back into the trees. But this time, Eleanor didn't feel loss. She felt peace, because now she knew he wasn't gone. He was still watching, and whenever she needed him most, he'd come back. After everything that happened, Eleanor found herself changed in ways she never expected. It wasn't just about surviving those terrifying days in the woods, it was about why she survived. The deeper truth was this: a stray cat, abandoned by the world, became her guide back to life. And that realization stirred something inside her. She began to see the world differently. Stray animals weren't just background noise anymore, they were untold stories waiting to be heard. Every time Eleanor looked at her students, especially the quiet ones, she saw a little of Milo in them. Those who didn't speak much, who sat in the back, who seemed forgotten. She made it her mission to reach them, to show them that being unseen doesn't mean being unworthy. In her art classes, she began assigning projects about hidden heroes. The kids drew stray dogs, shelter cats, even birds with broken wings. One child painted Milo, golden eyes glowing against a dark forest. Eleanor smiled through tears. His legacy was already taking root. The story of Milo became a kind of parable in town. People whispered to each other in cafes, shared it during stormy nights around fireplaces, and retold it to children who were afraid of the dark. It wasn't just an animal rescue story anymore, it was a rescue animal story. And in that shift, people began seeing their world differently. Pet adoption rates continued to rise. Foster families opened their homes. And more importantly, people opened their hearts. Eleanor often walked that same forest trail, now worn with more footprints than ever. She still brought treats, still paused at the carved memorial. But now, she walked with a softer heart and a steadier step. She knew Milo had given her more than a second chance. He'd given her a purpose. And as the wind rustled the leaves and the birds called out above her, she sometimes felt he was walking beside her. Quiet, unseen, but never gone. Because some lessons stay with us forever. That love doesn't always come wrapped in a perfect home or a polished collar. Sometimes it comes in the form of a scrappy, golden-eyed cat who emerges from the shadows just when you need him most. And once you've been touched by that kind of love, you never see the world the same way again. Years later, Eleanor sat on her porch, watching the sun dip below the trees that framed her backyard. Her hair had silvered, her hands a bit slower, but her spirit remained warm and sharp. Beside her, a younger cat stretched lazily, rescued from a nearby shelter naturally. His name was Echo, a quiet tribute to the one who came before. Though he was different in every way, his presence brought comfort. And every now and then, he'd stare off into the woods, just as Milo used to, as if waiting for a whisper in the wind. By then, Eleanor had written a book, a quiet memoir titled Guided by Whiskers. It wasn't meant to be a bestseller, but it somehow became one. Readers around the world cried with her, cheered for Milo, and found pieces of themselves in the lonely moments between the pages. Her story sparked conversations about the value of stray animals, the wisdom of creatures we often overlook, and the incredible bond that can exist between two souls, regardless of species. Shelters began naming adoption events after Milo. Milo's Day became an annual celebration in her town, where families gathered to share pet rescue stories, support shelters, and honor heroic pets who changed lives. Children would arrive dressed as cats, face-painted whiskers and all, and walk proudly next to their adopted companions. Eleanor was always there, sitting near the memorial trailhead, offering hugs, stories, and smiles. Sometimes she'd catch herself looking toward the trees, half expecting to see a flash of gold between the branches. Milo may never have worn a collar or slept in a cozy bed, but he left behind something far greater, a legacy. A ripple of kindness that stretched across time and distance. A reminder that even the smallest, quietest creatures can hold unimaginable strength. He wasn't just a pet hero or a character in an emotional pet story. He was proof that miracles don't always come with trumpets. Sometimes they arrive on silent paws and glowing eyes. And as long as hearts remain open, as long as people believe in the power of unexpected love, Milo's light will keep shining. In every rescue, in every adoption, in every whispered tale of a cat who found a woman in the woods and changed the world one life at a time. Some stories aren't just told, they're felt. And this one, it lingers. What Milo did wasn't just about leading Eleanor out of the woods. It was about leading her back to herself. He reminded us all that sometimes the smallest souls carry the greatest light. That even in the deepest silence, hope can still purr. And that rescue animals don't just need saving, they often become the ones who save us. If this story moved you, if you felt something stir deep inside while hearing about a golden-eyed cat who changed a life forever, then don't let that feeling fade. Let it guide you. There are so many stray animals out there waiting to write their own pet survival stories with someone like you. So subscribe to Wild Bounds, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover more powerful moments between humans and animals, stories of love, courage, and second chances. Because out there in shelters, on street corners, and deep in quiet forests, miracles are still waiting to happen. And who knows? The next one might just be walking toward you right now, on four paws, and with a heart full of hope.